All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. This is Lizzie. Today in our webinar, we're going to look at the very fourth pillar. I can't believe it's already that time. And we're also going to review some blueprint work that we've done so far and what needs to get done before February. So let's get started. So we're going to go over our reminders today and answer some of your questions or feedback from the previous webinar. Then we'll talk about fundraising, we'll talk about blueprint, and we'll talk about next steps. So I want to say before we move on that fundraising is a pillar that I know causes a lot of people a little bit of heartburn, a little bit of anxiety. Just keep in mind that as we talk about fundraising, this is all very much hypothetical in your future if you do become a Ready Start network. We'll get to that in a minute, but I do want to emphasize that as a Get Ready cohort network, you are not required to do any sort of fundraising strategy. This is just to kind of inform you as to what your future might look like a little bit if and when you become a Ready Start network. Okay. So, Get Ready funds, as you know, have been made available until June 30th of 2020. So we're very excited about that extension. We recognize many of you might need to make amendments because maybe you didn't think you'd have this funding for this long, and so you were just trying to spend your money however you could in the short amount of time that we previously thought we had. So now that we have until June, feel free to rethink your budget if you need to. I really want you guys to carefully consider the best ways to spend these money, what will give you the most bang for your buck. There have been a lot of very creative uses of these funds. Anything from professional development and coaching to people hiring like a part-time secretary of sorts or administrative assistant to help answer phones and keep up with some of the busy work so that the actual network leader can focus on what they need to do. Other people have helped use this money to hire people to do class observations, which also frees up their time. Other people are buying some classroom materials for centers that need it. So there are just a lot of creative ways that people have been spending their funds to the best of their abilities. And if you need some ideas or if you want to have a thought partner with that, let me know. And I can give you some more details about how other people are spending that. So if you haven't created your budget in EGMS yet, please do so as soon as possible. But we are flexible a little bit now that we have a little more time, but we do want to see that money get spent in the best way you can. All right, so we want a blueprint draft to be shared with me by the end of the day on Friday, January 24th. Originally, I gave you an earlier date so that I could take a look at them before our final webinar, but I realized that that is just a really quick turnaround and might not be able, most of you might not be able to get that in that amount of time. So this blueprint draft that is due to me on Friday, January 24th, I set this date because I wanted you to ensure that I could give you feedback before Super App is due. If this time doesn't work for you, please just notify me and we can work together. Just a reminder, the blueprint components include first, the analysis of the current state, second, mission and vision statements, and third, 3 to 5 goals with strategies, resources, and performance metrics. And so far, you should have submitted to me the very first one, the analysis of the current state, and at least one goal with those components. I've given feedback to everybody so far that has submitted those to me. I have recognized that a lot of people, particularly those in small networks, have had some struggles with getting this turned in on time. So if that's you, I've reached out to you, and hopefully we can make a plan together moving forward so that you get what you need done. So per the coordinated funding request guidance, the blueprints are supposed to be posted to your website and LinkedIn Super App. So when I say LinkedIn Super App, the Super App actually just asks for a URL. So it just asks for the website where this is posted. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But just a reminder, that new date that I'm asking for blueprints is Friday, January 24th. And a reminder that we only have one webinar left after today, and that's going to be next week on January 22nd. I know you're probably very excited to get your Wednesdays at noon back, but thank you for sticking with it so long and hanging in there. We are hoping to have our cohort 3 of Ready Start Network application released in February, and then that would be turned around and due back in April. So a couple of reminders there. Joining the Get Ready Network, first of all, you are not required to apply to be a Ready Start. This was a process for us to let you know what Ready Start work looked like. So maybe there's some of you who heard about what it entails and said, okay, maybe one day, but not quite yet. We're not quite there. Maybe some of you are ready to dive in head first and apply for cohort 3. And whatever it may be, if you want to talk about it, please let me know. I would love to gauge soon, not today necessarily, but soon. I'd love to have a gauge of how many of you are interested in applying for the cohort 3. We'll talk about that. But for now, I think my focus is mostly on making sure you get those blueprints done in time for Super App. And then after that, we can talk more a little bit about cohort 3 application. All right, so we had some feedback from the January 8th webinar that I want to go over. The first question was, can the website for the blueprint be on our school district website? Yes, it can. A couple of people are going to approach this in different ways. I want to share an example of what EBRs looks like. If you just bear with me for one moment, I'm going to pull that up. So East Baton Rouge Parish is a Ready Start network, and they have already posted their blueprint. And it's kind of got a page unto itself. If you see here, it says Ready Start EBR. And if you look closely, it says, for a more detailed version of the Ready Start EBR initiative blueprint, please email these 2 leaders. So I'm going to copy and paste this in the group chat so that you guys can look at it on your own if you would like. There we go. You'll notice that this is kind of an abbreviated version of their blueprint. They have their vision, they have their mission, and they have the introduction, which is their analysis of current state. This is where they get their background information on their blueprint. Their goals don't have as much detail as we've asked you guys to include in terms of your strategies, performance metrics, etc. But they chose to say at the top, like, if you want a more detailed version, you can email us for it. We, I think, are asking our Get Readies to post their blueprint in their entirety, including those strategies. But I wanted to share this with you to show you that if you choose, you could post your blueprint like this, even if you're not a Ready Start yet. You could have a whole page dedicated to it so that the public could view it and it kind of gets highlighted in that way. Other people might prefer to just have a PDF link so that it's just a link that they can click on and download what the blueprint looks like. It's up to you, whatever works best for you. But yes, you can put it on your school district website. So in the last webinar, we talked a little bit about governance and creating bylaws. And somebody asked that during the webinar, you shared that the State Department would provide support in developing governance within our networks. Are there agencies that could be contracted for help? So this past year, the LDOE actually contracted directly with an organization to help with local governance. We haven't decided if we're going to do the same in the 2020-2021 school year. But yes, there are definitely agencies that could help. The organization we contracted with this year is called LANO, which is the Louisiana Association for Nonprofit Organizations. So although most of you are not nonprofits, these people specialize in helping with bylaws and governing structures. So it's possible that the LDOE might enter into another contract like that, or it's possible we could refer you to an agency who could help you with that. I also know that if you become a Ready Start, I know of several consultants around the state who could work with things like that as well. So yeah, we would figure that out as you become a Ready Start, and we could continue that conversation and see if that's something you would need to spend your money on. Okay, so someone asked, in the Super App under the tab Long-Term Early Childhood Vision, we are asked to put the website address for the community's early childhood blueprint. Should we post our Get Ready Blueprint on our EC website and enter our EC website link in the Super App? The answer is yes. The website link in the Super App is not just required for current Ready Starts. We'd like anyone who has a blueprint to link it on our website to make it publicly available. If you're not a Ready Start network, you can indicate that. You can just say, you know, something along the lines of the blueprint made for the Get Ready cohort, or you can just say your early childhood network name. You don't have to indicate anything about Ready Start networks one way or another, because we're asking all community networks that if they have one to share it, whether they are Ready Start, Get Ready, or none, either of the above. So like I said earlier, this website can be, like, you could put your blueprint in a place of prominence or on its own page, which kind of highlighted, like I showed you earlier with EBRs, or it can simply be a link to a PDF. Okay, so someone was concerned. They thought that the asking for the blueprint vision and mission by January 21st limits the amount of participation by all program partners. We have worked with our program partners to analyze our current state and started on the vision as a group. We will complete the request, but it will be school board staff that end up drafting the vision and mission and goals with strategies. So I completely understand your concern. I first of all just want to say great job for including program partners in this process. I think that's really important, starting off the vision as a group. Unfortunately, we're just under some time constraints here, and I hate that you might not be able to finish the entire job with the program partners as you originally anticipated. A couple of thoughts. One, that January 21st date has been changed, only by a few days, but it has been moved to January 24th for you to email me. And I do want you to keep in mind that the blueprint is a work in progress. It's what we like to call a living document. So that version of it that I get on January 24th, that's so that I can give you some feedback before you submit it with your Super App application. But after that, I mean, that document can be altered. It can be brought to your program partners and revisited. You can say, okay, based on what we've done so far on our vision, this is what we came up with. But what is your feedback? How can we make it stronger? What are we missing here? You could also present to program partners what your goals were, and they might have some feedback on strategies. They might have an idea about goals you haven't mentioned so far. So anyways, the main point that I want to make here is, first of all, I recognize that this was a tight turnaround, and I'm really sorry that a lot of you might not have gotten the feedback that you wanted to get from your program partners with this process. But keep it up, keep engaging them, and even after that Super App is submitted, this blueprint can be revisited and can be altered and changed again if need be. We definitely want to encourage you to include those partners. All right, so I think those were all of my questions and concerns from last week. Remember, if you have any others, please type them in the group chat or email me directly if you have any other questions or concerns. So with that, we're going to move forward and talk about our fourth pillar, the fundraising pillar. So you've seen this graphic a million times. Want to further emphasize that these 4 pillars really depend on one another and really build on one another, especially in this way. So in order to do fundraising, when you really think about it, that's really why Ready Starts are kind of getting put into place, is because we want local communities to be able to generate and bring in their own funding if it's available. But in order to do that, we had to do these 3 steps first. They really do build on one another. We really can't start fundraising or even strategizing about funding without having done the first 3 things: blueprint, having a plan, having direction, coalition, bringing in people from the community, making your community more aware of what you do and what you need, and thirdly, governance. Setting up the formal governance structure so that if you do get funding or you do have opportunities for additional resources, you have parameters in place that help you make decisions and help you spend those funds with legitimacy. So the one we're focusing on today is how will you raise funds? And I would add to that and say it's not just how will you raise funds, but how will you strategically use the funds you already have? And how will you determine potential additional resources? So just want to emphasize again, this is work that most of our Ready Starts aren't even doing yet because they're still working on the first 3 pillars. This is something that definitely comes later in the Ready Start process. This is months down the line after becoming a Ready Start network. So we asked the question, how will you raise funds? After putting those first 3 pillars into place, you would survey resources available to support that blueprint. Think about what you need in order to achieve the goals of your blueprint. And the Ready Start Network would establish a plan to secure additional resources needed to achieve that vision. So you would strategize the opportunities to leverage existing funds. So what that means is looking at the funds you already have and seeing if there's any way to spend them strategically or creatively in a way that would maximize them, spend them as wisely as you possibly can. You'd also strategize opportunities to raise new funds. Are there possible grants in your area? Are there foundations who could support you? Could a business not far from you invest in early childhood? You would also, as a Ready Start network, optimize how seed funding should be allocated. Remember, Ready Start networks will bring seat allocations most likely to their local governing structure. Lastly, setting a clear strategy for how funds would be used if and when raised. So a lot of people, whether that be private donors or businesses, nonprofits, they will not just write a blank check. They would definitely want to know, okay, if I give you money, what is it going to be used for? How is it going to be spent? And how are you going to keep me informed on how this money is spent? So why do Ready Start networks need to develop fundraising strategies? So the state is dedicated to maximize our funding streams as much as we can and to fight for getting local communities additional funding. But we recognize that given the urgent need for early childhood, we want Ready Starts to also develop long-term strategies to identify and maximize funding resources. The state will apply for every grant opportunity we can, just like that preschool development grant that we just got this past year, which will allow for additional seats. And while that is really, really exciting, it's only a 3-year grant. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to think about longevity, and 3 years down the line, what are we going to do when we no longer have that funding available? And in our perspective, the best way to do that is to establish these Ready Start networks, because we think that the communities rather than the state are best suited to address unique early childhood education needs for families and children. So, a Ready Start is formed. Some of you might be becoming Ready Starts come July. Some of you might not be Ready Starts for a little while longer. But after a Ready Start is formed and you've developed that blueprint, you've recruited people to join your coalition, people of all different backgrounds, to really join your cause and fight for you and advocate for you. And then you would establish that local governance structure. You'd have some sort of council or advisory board in place that has parameters and bylaws. Then, after all of those components are done, and only then, are Ready Starts really empowered to develop fundraising strategies, to make the most efficient use of existing resources, and to identify other potential funding streams. So we've got currently 13 Ready Start networks, and I would say some of them are just now getting to this piece of their work, but many of them are still working on the first 3 components. And that's okay. This is something that definitely takes time, and in order for the fundraising or the possible fundraising strategies to be put in place, you really have to establish the first 3 pillars, which is why it's so important that we've talked about those pillars every single time, and I know you're probably sick of that visual graphic, but we talk about it every time because we've got to do those every single time first in order to get to the good stuff and start figuring out what are some new or potential funding streams we can tap into. So it takes time, and it won't happen overnight. They have to have several pieces in place before beginning to fundraise. Just like I said, Ready Start networks have to establish those other 3 pillars before they can even think about funding or fundraising. So once those 3 pillars are in place, they've created the blueprint, they've got a coalition of community members, they've established governance and enacted bylaws. When those 3 pillars are in place, then Ready Start networks will need to do a couple of things. They'll need to first identify all their current funding streams for early childhood in the community, what the funding is designated for. So that is in order to see, okay, how much money are we currently bringing in? What are we spending it on? And then a sort of analysis of it to see, is there a way we could better spend these funds or maximize the funds we do have? Then secondly, Ready Starts will need to eventually assign a realistic funding target for each blueprint goal. So for example, if one of your goals is about making sure 100% of your classrooms have a Tier 1 curriculum, then you would need to calculate the total cost of curriculum for the classes that don't yet have it. So for example, if that's 5 classrooms and curriculum costs $2,000 a piece approximately, then that means in order to achieve that goal, it would be about a $10,000 goal. So again, this is something that Ready Start networks are doing further down the line. They might not be working on this quite yet, and you certainly don't need to be working on this quite yet. But down the line, we hope that each goal will kind of be quantified in terms of how much money you would need to achieve it. That also will help when you talk to potential funders, because they would want to see, again, what their money is going toward or how much we need to accomplish certain goals. And having that quantified number for each goal would be helpful. So keep in mind that no single funding source will be sufficient to accomplish all the Ready Start Network's goals. We're hopeful that in addition to state dollars and the federal dollars we're bringing in through these grants, we're hopeful that local Ready Start networks can start thinking of creative potential funding sources. Of course, if any of you join in cohort 3, we will have already had 2 cohorts of networks kind of lay the groundwork for this. And so we'll hopefully be able, by the end of this year, to give you more concrete examples of ways that local Ready Start networks are fundraising. We actually don't really have any right now. We've got some talks of different things. The only exception I can think of that we have had is that Orleans, the mayor's office, they awarded them a significant amount of funding this next year in order to fund infant seats in their city. So that's really exciting. And hopefully we'll have even more examples like that come fall after our Ready Start networks are a little more established. But keeping that in mind, some potential funding sources that Ready Starts might look for might be dedicated local funding, like I just mentioned with Orleans. They went to their city, their mayor's office, and got some funds through them. Might be through parish government or school board, possibly nonprofit organizations or foundations. There could be some grants available, not just with local organizations, but national organizations might have some as well. Your business community might be able to help. Individual donors might be able to help. This is all just really exciting, and it is hard work, to say the least, but hopefully we'll have even more examples for you in the coming months. I've got a question from TNG. The New Orleans dedicated funding, is it for 1 year at a time, or do they establish a timeline limit for funding? That's a great question. My inclination is that it's for 1 year, but I might need to double check. I know there was a newspaper article about it, so I need to look at that and see, but I think it's for 1 year at a time. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to hit the highlights of what fundraising might look like if you become a Ready Start. Again, this is very much, as we said, a lot of work comes before starting to fundraise. This is not something that happens overnight. So if this is something that provides you a little bit of anxiety or you're unsure about, there's a lot of time before this kind of work will actually be put in place for you. And just keep in mind, for example, the blueprint that you've done, that will eventually help lead you to this. Your partners, your program partners, eventually if you create a coalition or establish a governance structure, all of those things have to happen first before we get to this component. Okay, again, we are going to chat about blueprint for just a moment, because that's really our ultimate goal with this Get Ready cohort, is for us to all have established blueprints by the end of it. So I want to do whatever I can to support you and to help you get to those finalized versions of your blueprint to post to your website. So this has already been said today, but I just want to reiterate, each blueprint contains an analysis of your current state, mission and vision statements, and 3 to 5 goals. And within each of those goals, they will have strategies, resources, and performance metrics. A lot of the information has gone out about the components of these. If you are in need of some technical assistance, if you want to talk about your particular blueprint, or if you read my feedback and you're unsure about how to make changes, I'm happy to hop on the phone with you and have a phone call to really talk about your plan moving forward. Just send me an email and we will hopefully get that scheduled as soon as possible. So I want to talk about vision and mission statements for just a moment, because I think a few of you still have yet to draft these. This is something it's kind of different from your analysis of current state and your goals. It's kind of a little loftier. You have to think like big picture, what you want, what you really want your network to look like, what you want it to achieve. And there's difference between the two. For example, your vision is your ideal future state if your Ready Start network achieves all of its goals. Why does this, excuse me, it still says Ready Start. This is an old slide. I need to go in and change it. It's just your network, your ideal future state if your network achieves all of its goals. It is your why. Your vision statement should be in the present tense, describe an outcome, use plain, unambiguous language, inspire and invoke emotion, and build a picture of the future. So I know that is a little confusing because it's this building a picture of the future. But one of the activities that we've shared in the past is something called Headlines from the Future. And it is what you would want like a newspaper headline to be, to say about early childhood in your community 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So it is still in present tense, but it is thinking loftily of what is true about your your community network. Your mission is a little different because it's about your purpose, what you're doing to achieve your mission, how, be clear and focused, avoid vagueness and unnecessary words, define who and where you're serving, and avoid education jargon. So jargon is just referring to the kinds of words that the typical average person in your community might not understand. We just want to make sure that your vision and your mission are accessible to anybody and that anybody could really understand what you're trying to achieve. So I want to take this moment. I know a lot of you have already developed a mission and vision statement, and I'm just curious to see if anybody wants to share about what that process looked like, who helped you with it, and did you use any of the guidance documents like Headlines from the Future or your mission statement exercise to help you draft these two components of your blueprint. I know I talked to Bridget from Sabine yesterday, and we talked about how she did a vision exercise with some of her partners. So maybe Bridget, if I could unmute you, maybe you can share a little bit about what that looked like, if you don't mind. Bridget, can you speak? Maybe we can see if we can hear you. Oh, I don't hear her, unfortunately. So maybe there's someone else who has done this mission or vision exercise or incorporated other people. So if that's the case, maybe you can type in the chat box or raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can share a little bit about what that looked like. Great, Michelle. Michelle used both exercises during their monthly meetings in October and November. I'm glad to hear it. I hope that was helpful. Did anybody else want to share about their mission or vision activities? Good, Michelle says they were very helpful. All right, Carmen from Tangi says they followed the guidance document and completed the activities. Very helpful. They held meetings with representatives of current partners. So they had Head Start, childcare directors, early steps, curriculum directors, coaches, and SPED liaisons. Wow, so you had a lot of people at the table. I'm curious as to how difficult that was to navigate a crowd like that to do these kinds of activities. I'm sure that they gave a lot of great feedback, but it's also kind of hard to rein in a little bit or focus on one thing sometimes when you have so many people at the table. So Carmen, if you want to share a little bit about what that was like, that would be great. Okay, I appreciate Carmen and Michelle sharing. Oh, Aloma says they had a luncheon with program partners and completed their exercises. Great, I hope that was helpful too. Carmen said they had around 14 people. We had to have a focus plan and agenda, a timekeeper, and keep going back to the activities when we got off track. Oh, that's a really great idea. I love that you guys had a very focused agenda. I love that you had a timekeeper. I know what it's like to have 14 people who are all very excited about early childhood around the table, and wanting to contribute their thoughts. So it sounds like you really had to plan ahead a little bit to make sure you guys could get what you needed done. But that's a really, really great strategy to employ when you have so many people. Okay, and Bridget said they used the guidance document and worked through it with our policy council, and it was very interesting to hear from parents. Oh, I love that, Bridget. We really love that you included parents in this process. Thank you for sharing. All right, thank you, Carmen, Bridget, Alema, and Michelle for sharing all of your feedback on how you developed your mission and vision statements. I hope that some of you, if you maybe haven't yet developed them, or if maybe this is something that you revisit. So keep in mind that your mission and vision are not necessarily set in stone at this moment. So if you submit them with your super app in early February, but you want to revisit them with your program partners, maybe you guys all didn't have a chance to do what Carmen did or do what Bridget did and really hash it out and think about the vision statement as a group, you're more than welcome to revisit it. And definitely, I encourage you to take some of these strategies with you. These are all great ideas. Okay. All right. So moving on, talking about goals and strategies, I wanted to know, did any of you work with program partners to identify goals and strategies, or maybe you brought them to your program partners after you established a goal or strategy? I have a feeling that this is something that might not have happened quite yet, but you're planning to eventually bring. But I just wanted to check in and see if anybody wanted to share about that first. If anybody has had this experience. Oh, man, Carmen, you stayed busy. So they're doing the same process and they're meeting Friday to go over these goals and strategies, sounds like. Great. I know a lot of people, it seems, might have to be working on this just within their own lead agency. So just keep in mind, even if you aren't necessarily able to involve your partners right now, given the time constraints, this is always something you want to revisit with them. And you can keep, it's always a good idea to keep them up to date with what you've created so far and to get their feedback. Michelle also said their program partners looked at data kits to help develop the SMART goals. It's a great idea. That data kit has so much information in it. It really gives a great comprehensive overlook for the past 3 years in your community networks. If you are having trouble locating your data kit, I want to let you know it is located, an updated version is located in your FTP under the folder Network Administration. All right, so I want you guys to think about, once this blueprint is developed and put in place, how do you think that you will use this document moving forward? Who are you going to share it with? We've already talked about program partners exhaustively, so we don't have to answer that third question, but just think about it. Where do you see this blueprint going, and how will you be sharing it in the future? So many of you will probably, of course, be sharing it with program partners. It's possible that you could share this when and if you become a Ready Start network. You could share it when you are recruiting people to be a part of your coalition and to get on board with early childhood. Of course, eventually you could use it to help with funding and finding funders and really letting them know what the need in your community looks like. There's lots of potential uses for it in your future, and I hope that you found the process to be helpful and to get you on track with a focus on the future as to what direction you really want to take your community network. So, okay, Michelle, to go back to that question, Michelle said, today we decided we would revisit it at our monthly meetings until we have decided to apply for the Ready Start Network. I think that's a great idea to just take a look at it. It's something that you want to have in the forefront of your mind, that this is what your eventual, this is what you want your community network to achieve in the near future. I think that's a great idea to keep it, keep bringing it up at monthly meetings and then make that decision collectively whether or not you're ready to apply for Ready Start. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate all of your sharing today. So that really concludes our webinar today. So today we went over what fundraising could look like for you possibly in the future if you become a Ready Start network. We revisited some components of the blueprint. And I think that we're going to give you a little bit of time back, and we're not going to take the full hour today. So just keep in mind, please, if you can, submit a finalized blueprint draft to me by January 24th. If this is problematic for you, let me know. I know some of you are probably still freshly processing the recent feedback I gave you. If you feel like the 24th isn't possible and you can't do that quick of a turnaround, let me know. But I do want you to keep in mind that we all just have a very quick turnaround, and that the super app is due February 7th. So that means that when you submit your super app, you have to have a link to your blueprint somewhere on your website, linked there. So we just want to make sure you have that done in time. If this is problematic, again, please just let me know. In the meantime, thanks again to all of the people who shared today. A lot of you might have some follow-up thoughts and questions, and if that's the case, I am posting the survey right now in the chat box because I know a lot of you also can't get to tiny URLs from your network. So if you would please ask any lingering questions you might have in the survey, any concerns or comments you want to make, please list it there. I have emailed some of you, specifically those who might need a closer look at their blueprints or might need some help making sure all the components are in place. So if that's the case, if that applies to you, if you think you might need some more hands-on assistance from me, please let me know when a good time to reach you would be, or please let me know just in general if I haven't indicated that I need to give you a call. So what I mean by that is that if you feel like you need some guidance from the department on how to complete this in time, or how to complete a certain component, or just some direction in general, you feel like you can't really do it based on the guidance I've given so far, then let's set up some time to talk. Let's make sure we get this done. I really just want to make sure we have all of our Get Ready cohort prepared, ready to turn in that blueprint in a couple of weeks. So thank you all so much for your time today, and I hope you all have a great, nice, long weekend. Take care.